What's up, everyone? So there's this concept that just stuck with me when I was reading this book, and basically how it went was, if you give a poor person $1 million in a year, that person will be poor again. But if you take a rich person and you take away all his or her money in a year or 5 years, he or she will be rich again. And if you really explore this concept, you realize that the rich people really have some sort of value beyond the fact that they have wealth. And obviously, by rich people, we're referencing the people who have actual intellectual value of some sort, excluding those who just got lucky and won the lotto. And so, the general idea behind this is how important it is to understand personal finance and managing your money and educating yourself on all this. And in this video, I have plenty of examples and stories and concepts to tell you guys about people who have just squandered all their wealth because they had no idea what they're doing with it, and people who have managed to accumulate wealth despite not having money. So let's just get started. And if you like these sort of videos, if you find these sort of things interesting, go ahead and hit the subscribe button and the like button, and let's just get started. So I want to start with a very relevant example. There's this man, his name is Brian Banks, and a few years ago he was going to college and he had all these scholarships, and people thought he was definitely going into the NFL. He was a great football player, and all of a sudden he got accused of rape, and ultimately his lawyer told him, you have two choices. You have to confess you are guilty, and that will shave many years off your sentence, and you'll get 5 years in jail. The other thing would be to refuse to confess that you're guilty, and then you're facing 47 plus years in jail. So he ended up confessing he was guilty, even though he wasn't guilty. And 5 years later, he came out of jail, and he lost all his scholarships, he lost everything. And first off, it personally just developed him tremendously, but it was a horrible thing. And lo and behold, the female who accused him admitted that she was not raped, which he already knew. But she admitted it to him again, and later on they managed, through the use of a hidden camera, to capture this woman's confession on video. And she also said that she didn't want to confess and help this man despite wanting to help him in any other way, because she didn't want to pay back the $1.5 million that she got from settlement for this rape case. And it was just horrible situation, because I mean, look at it. Like, this woman seemed to have just accused this man of rape and gotten a lot of money from it, and it's just a horrible thing to do. And finally, some justice was revealed by her finally getting exposed on camera. Now probably her reputation is tarnished. And it's a horrible situation, and there's many more details that I don't want to get into. But here's what's interesting about this scenario. It's one example of numerous cases where a poor person shows that even if you stumble across a lot of money, if you don't know how to manage it properly, it can all just disappear through your fingertips. And the reason for that are manifold. There's probably so many charlatans and tricksters and people wanting your money and doing all sorts of stuff to get your money, befriending you, scamming you, begging you to donate, all this stuff. And for her, it's interesting because she when she went to the place where she got videotaped through a hidden camera confessing that the rape never actually happened, she went there on a bus. And it kind of shows you how she kind of lost all her money. And according to a news report, apparently she literally spent most of that 1.5 million already on cars and all sorts of stuff with the rest of her family. And you could see by the video where she was admitting to all this that she literally had like nothing expensive on, and she looked like a typical average person, like literally just like very typical, overweight, very cheap clothing. And in addition to that, the news video mentions that all of that money that she had gained from the court settlement had now been spent. So it's a very interesting case study to show you. I think a lot of people think that, oh, when I get this thing, whether it's a girlfriend or boyfriend or lots of money, that everything will change. They'll have better grooming, they'll have better fashion, they'll be finally fit, they'll finally be very smart and intelligent and all this stuff. And it's not oftentimes true. It's like you are using this as some sort of crutch so you don't start moving towards your goal right now. And finally, when you ever end up striking it lucky and getting that money, you end up just using it as what money can be used for, which is a luxury to not do things. So oftentimes with that freedom, it accentuates how you are. Money can oftentimes there's that old saying that goes, money accentuates who you already are before you had money. So the poor person who gets rich and he's obese and has problems eating, with that freedom, it would just allow you to eat a plethora of foods that you couldn't afford earlier. Oftentimes, many of those foods are even more unhealthy. And I'm sure you can go down the list with everything for this sort of thing. And I guess I'm still kind of weirded out why her fashion sense was still so bad. But again, I think that's also a thing. It's like grooming and fashion sense. It's something you can start working on now. And like if you have bad taste or no idea, or you think you have good fashion but you really don't, like having money is not going to fix that. Anyhow, that's one example. Another is of the opposite, of someone who went into massive debt. Now, I don't recommend you doing this, but it's a big example that pops up. Donald Trump, he got a pretty big head. He wrote a book on it, which I read. It's called How to Be Rich, and it more so goes on about life advice. And for him, he inherited a medium-sized inheritance and business in real estate, and he grew that into a billion-dollar business. And from the time he was born to when he went to college and when he went out of college, he was always successful. Unfortunately, it gave him an exceptionally big head, and he was very arrogant. And he recalls this in his book, and he says how every real estate deal he did turned to gold, and he got exceptionally more arrogant right out of college. And eventually, a huge real estate crash occurred, and it just bankrupted him and put him into massive, massive debt, to the point where he was billions of dollars in debt. And he walked past this homeless man on the street, and he said, well, that guy is billions of dollars richer than me, which is a ridiculous thing that I don't recommend anyone even bother to get into that sort of situation. But he started working on himself, figuring things out, working with the bank, and doing everything he could. And finally, he's righted himself financially so that now he's worth billions again. And that's a incredible feat to go through, and not something I or anyone else should go through or should want to go through. And I guess another great example is Floyd Mayweather. This is a person who uh, was not taught finance or how to manage his money by his family, like maybe some of you viewers aren't. And that caused a lot of problems because he was exceptionally gifted and skilled, and he put in a lot of practice at developing a skill, which was boxing. And this is a man who spends a lot of money, and unfortunately for him, he really has to get together his game. He was the most highest earning sports athlete of the recent year. And the problem with not understanding your finances is you have all these people that you don't know if you can trust. These financial advisors who oftentimes, because it's not their money, they're much more frivolous and less thrifty with it, and doing all sorts of risky stuff. And it happens all the time. And one other boxer who just screwed up completely was Mike Tyson. He made millions upon millions every year boxing, and he spent more than he earned. And although he made tens of millions, he ended up spending hundreds of millions, and it put him in severe debt and bankruptcy because of it. And that's a clear example of someone who, although he's making millions, you would think everything's set. He just didn't really keep track of it and keep a cap on it, and it just destroyed him. And it's a very interesting thing. People who understand this, you might find it surprising, but Dan Bilzerian in an interview, Dan Bilzerian is this man who, he's very famous on Instagram. He has all these mansions, and he takes all these photos with all these girls in bikinis, and he has like millions of followers on Instagram. This man, in an interview, when he was asked this question about his finances, he actually addressed it and said he doesn't worry about it because although it doesn't seem like it, he understands this, and apparently he was tested for IQ back when he was in the, I believe, the Navy or the Air Force, and he was like at the top of the charts, and he managed his finances so that everything worked together. So the businesses that he was part of were generating enough so that he could, so that they can keep up with how much he was spending, and that's something I don't think a lot of people understand or a lot of people even bother to. So if you guys are willing to watch and view this, you guys are ahead of the curve. There are people out there who I have tried helping with this advice, and they just turn a blind ear to it. They don't want to hear about it. They think they're smarter, and when you start listening to them, they have this sort of narrow mind where they have to speak over you. They won't let you a moment to give your opinion, and they just think they don't understand this. They're just like, yeah, if I had $100,000, I'd be set for the rest of my life. And it's just very, very peculiar how people can shoot themselves in the foot like that. And so I think it's a very interesting concept, and a lot of people, for whatever reason, their parents, despite their parents maybe understanding personal finances or doing fairly well, for whatever reason, they don't bother to teach their children. For whatever reason, maybe it's because the parents just naturally picked it up on their own and never really fully understood the importance of teaching it. Like, for instance, a lot of parents I've seen who have achieved their success just by their natural brilliance, and this can sort of be somewhat of a bad thing because they don't really fully grasp the hardness and the pain and all the stuff that you have to go through when you're not the most brilliant to achieve success. And because of that, they don't really instill it on their children, and they just think or maybe assume that, okay, whatever happens to my child or whatever they want to do, they can do, and that can lead to problems as well when the children aren't educated about stuff like personal finance or getting good grades or achieving success, or they don't have the right motives or perspectives or goals, and that can just screw everyone up. And so I think it's a very interesting thing, and if you guys have stayed and watched this entire video, you guys are just ahead of the curve tremendously. Like, I can go out in the street and just start talking to people about this and trying to educate them and help them, and you'll be surprised. Like, the average population, especially the youthful population, certain, not all of them, but a lot of them, they're just focused on partying or drugs or alcohol or the frivolities of life, sports, partying. And if you try and like even talk to them about this stuff, it's like going in one ear and out the other. And it's like the most stupidest and illogical thing ever, because it's like, I'm trying to help you, and if I don't help you, like in the future, whether you like it or not, you're going to be screwed over. So what I've sort of found is that if people don't want to be helped, there's nothing you can really do. You can't force it down their throats. And the tides of life, I guess, over the long term will generally figure things out for themselves. And it's funny because you will run into people they literally just like are stuck in their beliefs that if you can make a lot of money every year or as a salary, you are set no matter what. And these are the people that, like, when you start asking them questions on stuff like, well, what happens if you spend more than you make and stuff like that, they're like, oh, it's okay, if I make that much, it won't be a problem. And like, are you logically thinking this through? If you spend more than you make, you're going to be screwed over. And they just don't really completely understand the concept. And I can see them, if they even ever make it to that point where they make that much, they probably won't. If they do, they're probably going to be spending like $200,000 on the most ridiculous, stupid stuff when they're only making like $50,000 every year. And then they're just going to be severely in debt. And there's this other great book that just very much accentuates this topic. It's this book called The Millionaire Next Door, which goes through a bunch of scientific studies on income, and a lot of very surprising results come from this study. And one of these results was they found that the people who did the best with their managing their money were not the high income earners, which consisted of the doctors and lawyers, nor were they the poorest people, but they were the people in between those income levels. Because I guess the people who are doctors and lawyers, they may have just been stuck in that mindset where they focused all their time on becoming a doctor and lawyer and memorizing and just honing their craft, but they never took the time to learn anything about personal finance. And that caused them to just have this subconscious mindset of, oh, if I become this high earner, everything's set. And basically they used this ratio, and it basically implied that these doctors and lawyers were spending way more than they should based off how much they earned. And the people who did the best with their earnings were these people who earned less than these lawyers, but were not poor or broke or of the exceptionally low income class either. And I think it's very important too. And I think another big misconception, just to conclude with this video, is the fact that doctors and lawyers by themselves are not the most high earners at all. And that's a huge misconception that I think a lot of people, even the Asian community, who everyone thinks is just like so much better in the Western communities, they think that doctors and lawyers are like the highest earners, and that's not necessarily true, because they're bound by hourly wages. they're bound by how much time they put in per hour because they're offering their services. It's only when it becomes a business and it's scalable do you get to the $1 million range or $1 billion range, with a few exceptions. And generally, the reason is because you don't have to put in a certain one-on-one service anymore. It's like a scalable thing. And again, you can do this with any sort of field. There are doctors and lawyers who have created businesses out of what they do and become billionaires. And there are billionaires in every sort of, almost every sort of product or service you can think of. From selling women's yoga clothing to guitars to agriculture to farmland to medical devices to music to all sorts of stuff. And I think it's very interesting. But again, as a disclaimer, that doesn't mean you can just jump into anything. There's only so many billionaires in this world, and this is like a fraction of a percent of people. But that's all we want to say. As always, like, favorite, comment, subscribe. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next video if you're subscribed. Thanks for watching, and leave a comment if you have anything to say.